Very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers. Welcome to another Let's Talk. As usual, we are delighted to be with you on the airways of Second Advent Radio and through our social media platforms, SLC Adventist, SLC Church Channel. We trust that you are having a wonderful time in the Lord and that you are in good health. We are discussing a health issue this afternoon, a health issue of uh, tremendous significance, I may say. We are, again, I want to remind our viewers, celebrating 5 years of Let's Talk this month. We are therefore having a blend of some new and old programs. After this month, we will determine what happens, but we are delighted to be with you. And today we are discussing the subject of cancer-proofing your life. Cancer-proofing your life. Before we get into this very exciting discussion and before I introduce our special guest, I'd like to invite you to have a word of prayer, shall we? Eternal Father and our God, we pray that you will be with us, be with our friends, those who are listening via the World Wide Web, via our YouTube channels, those who are listening via Second Advent Radio. We pray that you will grant wisdom and understanding, be with our guest in a very special way. Grant, oh God, that as she shares concepts and principles that will be effective in helping us to not just understand, but to practice good health principles, give clarity and understanding, give clarity to her and understanding to those who listen, so that we may all benefit. In Jesus' name, amen. Friends, this afternoon, we are revisiting a subject that we discussed in very great detail a year and a few months ago. We have with us as our special guest for today, Dr. Natalie Greaves. Dr. Natalie Greaves is a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Cave campus. She is instrumental in forming the Palliative Care Society in Barbados, does a lot of work in that regard. She also does significant work in the area of cancer research, and we are delighted to have her with us this afternoon again on Let's Talk. Dr. Greaves, welcome again.
Thank you, Dr. Greene. Thank you for having me. Happy Sabbath to those of you who are Sabbath keepers. And for everyone else, I hope that you're having a wonderful day. So thank you for taking the time to join this conversation that Dr. Greene and I are going to have today. So thanks for having me. And happy 5th year anniversary.
Thank you. I want to ask you to, afterwards, please give a special shout out and greeting to your mother-in-law. I understand she has been one of our very ardent listeners and viewers. Well, we want to get into the discussion right away. 1 hour, as you know, goes by very quickly. Back in February 2024, you did a series here on Let's Talk, a series on cancer. I believe it was 4 or 5 presentations. Many persons still talk about that series. So we spoke about various types of cancer and their impact on the individual and on society. Now, it seems to me, though, that since that time, not much has changed in terms of the numbers of persons who are succumbing to the effects of this illness. To be very honest, I may say that it appears that things have even become a little worse in terms of on the increase. I don't know if I'm correct, and I don't know that you may have statistics relating to the difference between then and now. Just this week, somebody contacted me about a few persons who are very close to them who have succumbed to this deadly disease. It's just one situation after another. So am I correct to be concerned? And I know that my observations may not be very scientific, but it does seem to me as though we are not really making a significant, should I say, inroads into the reduction of the prevalence of cancer in spite of the vigorous education program that we have been seeking to do. Share with us, Dr. Grace.
Okay, so firstly, I think maybe a couple things are happening. You know, sometimes when you become more aware of something, something enters into your consciousness, maybe you notice it a bit more. That happens to me. So I've never seen a particular car on the road, and then I see it, and then it's like I'm seeing it all the time. And so sometimes that happens. So sometimes when you are more aware of something, you just become more attentive to it, and it seems like it's increasing. Between 2024 and now, fortunately, we wouldn't have the statistics to say what the change in prevalence is, or incidence, or even mortality across the islands in that short space of time. So usually the cancer statistics, they roll in. Sometimes they roll in quite slowly. So you're usually lagging sometimes almost 3 years behind. So I rattled off some words there, so I'm just going to break it down. So incidence is the number of new cases, number of people in a given year who new cases that you detect. The prevalence is simply put the amount of persons are usually expressed as a percentage, the number of people with a given condition at a particular point in time. And when we speak about mortality, we're talking about deaths in terms of the number of persons that have died of a particular condition. And there are ways that you map out that statistic so that you can compare across countries regardless of the population of those countries. So all of that to say that we can't speak to a change between 2024 and now, but we can speak to a change from, say, 1966 to now coming forward. And it would seem that the incidence, the prevalence, and the mortality, so the number of new cases, the number of persons generally being detected with cancer might be increasing as a whole. But for some cancers, there is good news that the number of new cases for some cancers is dropping. And those are particularly cancers, including cancers in our region that affect women. I'm speaking specifically of cervical cancer. The number of new cases of cervical cancer over the last 10 years has been falling. And a lot of that has to do with screening tests that women are now availing themselves to more readily, something called the pap smear test, and also the use of, might be controversial, we could talk about it, the possible impact that we're beginning to see of the human papillomavirus vaccine. So to summarize, I would say, Dr. Greene, it may be that you are more aware, and because you're more aware, you're noticing it more. But generally, the incidence and other important numbers related to cancer seem to be increasing, but there are good stories in between for cancers that have screening and early detection where the programs are robust and strong. We are seeing improvements, and I'm very wanting to talk about some of the ways that we can actually change, just not just awareness, but change awareness into behavioral change, and how that can then over the long run help us to, as you coined the talk for today, cancer proof our lives.
Well, I'm gonna hold on to the good news. The good news is
Good
something
news.
that we want to hold on to. So I'll hold on to that, and I'm gonna celebrate that.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that in some instances there's some types of cancers that are on the decline, and you
Yes.
mentioned significantly cervical cancer, and you did say that one of the reasons for that may be the increase in screening. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing we're going to emphasize. And also, I know that governments across the Caribbean are pushing the vaccine for the what is it called? The H.
Human papillomavirus, yeah. And I can talk about that if you want.
Yes, definitely, definitely. So we will give you the opportunity to talk about that in a little bit. But I want to continue for now with some more observations, because once upon a time it used to be that folks get cancer in their old age. Now that's my observation. Um, but nowadays, again, perhaps because of increased awareness, it seems to me that a number of children and even babies are being impacted by cancer. What's the reason for this change in
Yeah.
demographic that is being impacted by cancer?
Okay, so we already established that there may be issues related to awareness. So I just want to say, just across the globe, every year almost 400,000 children are diagnosed with cancer. And I think some of it now is because we are picking up these cancers, we are becoming more aware of them than ourselves as physicians, as doctors, as scientists. What we do know is that we don't have robust screening, and you can't really say that if you do this particular thing with a child, or you do this a particular lifestyle change, that it will stop a child from becoming getting cancer in their childhood. What we can say is that most of the things that are done for children in terms of helping them to adopt healthy lifestyles is seeking to impact them in the future. I say all of this to say that the world is changing around us, and it is possible that children, as they're developing or are being exposed to more environmental changes, more toxins, more chemicals, etc., that could be putting them at increased risk, but we don't know enough as yet. Yeah. So it could be that, before we had all of these names for things that children would have, but we weren't necessarily classifying them as cancers, so to speak. But I think what we're seeing in terms of increased numbers might be just picking up now because of awareness. But I know sometimes that question usually follows on, and I'm not sure if that's where your mind was going. So your question might be, is there something in the environment? Is there something that is causing children to become sicker or more sick or something like that? And I would want to say that we don't know yet, but we do know that we can help our children to adopt healthy lifestyles that could help them to be healthier in the future. Yeah.
Well, there seems to be a price for some of the technological advances that we have made over the years. And I do know that sometimes we get it wrong. When I say we, I'm talking generally, because in the past we've had significant breakthroughs that people have had to eventually pull the plug and say, hold on there. Asbestos was supposed to be a very good invention because it was fireproof and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
and was in very wide circulation. And then we discover, hey, this is
Yeah.
creating a challenge. Uh,
Yeah.
so we do
Agree.
have these things,
Yeah,
plastic,
we do.
you know. Mhm.
Yeah. So let me just speak to the things that might seem interesting to people, but the science is building on. So you threw out asbestos. For most of us in the Caribbean, in the 1960s, there would have been this growth of, government provided housing and so forth, and a lot of the building material might have been asbestos type roofs. As long as the asbestos is intact, it's not problematic. But if it breaks and the fibers are inhaled, then it can go on to cause problems that could lead to different kinds of lung cancers. There is generally a concern for people who are exposed to cell phone use. There's been some research about cell phone use and what we call one-sided, same-sided tumors in children in their brains. That's very still early, and the debate is still going on. So if you want to look up, you can look up something called a glioblastoma and what we call ipsilateral tumor. So some evidence would suggest that it's not something that you want children to be using radiation emitting devices at very young ages close to their brains, but it's not the evidence is not strong enough, robust enough to say to parents, don't X, Y, or Z definitively, but it is something that people can be on the lookout for. And then not so much in our climate, because like here I'm standing in this room, all the windows are open, etc. But for people who live in northern climates where their houses and their homes are tightly sealed, especially during the winter months, there are some chemicals that are emitted from glues and dyes and furniture and that kind of stuff, something called radon, and that can increase the risk of certain types of tumors, lung cancer in particular, in people who stay in that setting for long periods of time. But as I said, I don't want this to be a conversation where people then suddenly go and throw out all their cell phones and stop using glue and that. That's not what we're trying to say. But we're saying that, I think that's what you're hinting at, is that evidence evolves, and as the evidence evolves, we make the necessary changes. But if you want to say a wise man sees a danger afar off and he avoids it, um, those might be things that may be interesting. But there is very strong evidence in terms of the role of exercise and diet and things that we know that the evidence is very strong for some of the other cancers.
It would be interesting for us to have a conversation sometime on this whole matter of cell phone use by children. I know screen time is a big debate these days, and but that's for another time. I want to ask you, however, for the benefit of those who may have missed the series you did in February, of course, they can always go back on YouTube and search for it because they're all there. But if you can just now review the basics of what we need to know about the definition of cancer, and then we can move on to talking about cancer proofing.
Okay, cool. So firstly, I want to encourage everyone, if you don't already have a paper, you should have a little paper, pen, and notebook, etc. You can call your friends and let them know to watch. So one, when we speak about cancer, we're really talking about an umbrella term. So cancer is like a group of diseases. And essentially what you're saying that this group of diseases, it can essentially occur in any part of the body. So how we are made up, which is the same example that I gave last year, is that we live on these islands and we have, beautiful sand that we walk on. And if you're flying over, which island are you in? Because you're always hopping. Are you in Antigua today?
Yes, I am.
Okay, right. Okay, so if I'm flying over a beach in Antigua and I'm looking down, I would see all of these. I would just see like this nice white stretch of beach. But if I'm literally on the ground on that beach, I'm walking on billions, trillions of grains of sand. And that's how we are. So I'm going to use the same example. You're looking at me. I'm looking at Dr. Greene because I can't see you. And I'm seeing what I think is all of him. But if I had to drill down with the microscope, there are all of these little cells that are working together to perform particular roles. So you have skin cells, you have muscle cells, you have cells of your nervous system, you have cells that are designed to keep the lining of the mouth moist and all these things. And when you get into those cells, the body is so marvelously complex. You have little programs, so to speak, instruction systems that say to the cell, this is your job, this is what you're supposed to do. Now, what happens with a cancer cell, how cancer begins, is that a cell becomes damaged, and it becomes damaged in such a way that certain things happen. It wants to replicate itself fast. It wants to grow and divide and make other cells that are like it. It wants to avoid natural systems. So what happens is if a cell becomes abnormal, your body sends out signals and causes the cell to, we can still see you, it was just a temporary glitch. It sends out signals to the cell to say, you are not programmed properly, you are not doing what you're supposed to, we need you to go in and close in on yourself and die. So it goes through a natural process of cell suicide called apoptosis. And there are other things that come in to help to control cells. If a cell becomes damaged, it's not supposed to stay around. But what happens with cancer cells, they become damaged, they figure out a way to become immortal, how to create other things like themselves, how to close in on themselves, to avoid that process. And more importantly, they don't want to stay where they are. So suppose they were bad behaved in Antigua, then maybe they want to go to St. Croix or St. Martin and they want to spread. So that process is called metastases. So what we're saying is that cancer is really a group of diseases. And what happens is a cell gets damaged, and it can get damaged by some of the things that we talked about, whether chemicals or infection, etc. It becomes damaged, and it wants to continue to live forever and to grow rapidly and to divide and become very, very selfish. And the other thing that they do is they draw blood vessels to themselves. So they make new blood vessels, and they use up energy that other cells should be using and so forth. So usually what you're trying to do when you're trying to control cancer is to try to stop cells from becoming damaged in the first place, or to try to help your body if a cell becomes damaged, that your immune system, the natural police system of the body, can take care of that cell very quickly, or if it has become, if a cell has become damaged, it can be picked up and dealt with as quickly as possible. So that's what the concept of cancer proofing is about. Stopping a cell from becoming damaged. If it has become damaged, boosting your body's immune system so that you can take care of that cell. And if it is that it's evading all these things, to pick it up early so that it can be treated. Because the earlier you treat a cancer, the better. Does that help, Dr. Greene?
That definitely does help. I was sitting here thinking, you are such an excellent teacher. You have this
Oh, bless your heart.
explaining things that make them so easy to understand. I wish I had the privilege of having you as a teacher in my class. Now that you have so clearly outlined those things, we want to jump into this matter of cancer proofing. I want to think, though, that some cancers are related to hereditary factors, and therefore may be what we say inherited, or because they are related to our, our family heritage, so to speak. Can you explain how that works and give us an idea of how common this may be?
Okay. Okay. We talk about something called risk. So it's the likelihood that something can occur. Now, some persons may be in families where you inherit or you get something from the generation that was above because of the genes that they're passing down. So when how humans are made, when a sperm comes from the male and it meets with an egg and they unite, the material from the father meets with the material from the mother, and you have a sort of a fusion or a combination of sorts, and that goes on. Now, sometimes you can have some things that are passed on from your father's side or your mother's side, and then it ends up in you, so to speak. Now, some things, once you get them, they have a very strong likelihood of increasing your risk of cancer. Okay, you don't need a something called dominant and recessive, but I'm not gonna let your compliment go to my head because I'm struggling here to explain this one. But you can inherit something from your mom or your dad, and it comes into you, and you also have the possibility of passing it on to your children. But not in every case it's 100% that what your mother experienced, you will experience. You may have that gene, but it may never develop into cancer. So we talk about risk or likelihood. So what happens is some cancers and some genes, in particular, I'm thinking about a gene that a lot of people know about. It's called the BRCA gene or the BRCA1 gene. It also has BRCA2. It's what we will call a germline mutation. It's going to pass on, and when you get that, it increases your risk. It doesn't mean that you will get cancer. It doesn't mean that, but it will increase your risk. It will increase the likelihood of getting prostate cancer. If you're a male, it can increase the risk of getting breast cancer, etc. And then there are other hereditary syndromes that might be important for colorectal cancer, especially colorectal cancer in African Caribbean people or people of African descent. That might be very important. So usually what you will do, I think the thing that I want to emphasize here is that families need to talk to each other. Families need to talk to each other. So this is something that I say all the time. On my mother's side, on her father's side, so my mom, her two of her brothers and one of her sisters died of colorectal cancer. Yeah? And also her dad had a cancer as well. So what does that mean for my mommy? It means that she gets screened for colorectal cancer. Me, out of an abundance of caution, although I'm at a lesser risk than my mom, I started screening early. So I think sometimes in Caribbean settings we have this secrecy. We don't tell people what's happening, and that secrecy sometimes can be detrimental. So if you have a situation in families where what we call a first degree relative, so your mother, your father, your brothers or your sisters had a cluster of cancer or a particular kind of cancer, that's something that you need to know. So maybe if your last name is Greaves and you live in the northern part of St. Lucie in Barbados, we might have a clustering of colorectal cancer within that genetic framework. And so it's important for us to share information. So I would say that breast cancer is associated with germline mutations. There's some association with prostate as well, some with ovary. And then there's even some eye tumors that little children can get that can be passed on. So families need to talk. And also there's counseling that is available. There are now all of these nice things where your doctor can talk to you and work out your risk and so forth, and you can get counseling. And it's important because like for a regular person, they may need to get their colorectal screening tests. They might only start that at 45. I started at 35 out of an abundance of caution. So all different kinds of things can change to help a person pick up things early if you know that there might be a clustering in your family. You might not wait till 40 or 50. You might start a little earlier, or some people might just get a mammogram. But if you have a clustering of breast cancer in your family and this gene is present, you wouldn't just do a mammogram and an ultrasound. You may do another test that might be more sensitive, and you may do that test more often. So if I were to summarize that, yes, cancers can be passed down. The gene that puts you at increased risk can be passed down from generation to generation. Not everybody is guaranteed to have a cancer if just because it's in your family, but you share the information for the benefit of the generation around you and the generation coming after, so that they can access things that can help them to pick up cancers earlier.
It's interesting that you raised that issue. We today in the church that I attended, we were launching a mental health ministry. And one of the presenters was sharing a personal experience on the benefits of families talking. Because through a conversation, she was able to discover that, somebody in her family had some challenges in a particular area, and that placed her in a position to be able
Get
to
help.
take precaution
Yeah.
earlier.
Yes.
As you spoke, it occurred to me that unfortunately, we still have, I'm saying unfortunately, but the reality is we still have individuals who are having children, and sometimes a child is born and they don't know who the father is, because here's a lady who is going with 3 different persons, and this child is born, and the child grows up not knowing the father. And as you mentioned, the whole concept of talking and sharing about family heritage. This happened to my grandfather. This happened to my father. And here's an individual now who will not be able to benefit from that because they don't know who their father or their grandfather is. I just thought about it.
Yeah, so I would say that it's gonna sound funny, but I think of Jesus automatically. And I'm sure there must have been somebody in Nazareth saying, Jesus, hey, nobody know who your daddy is, you know? You know, there's a stigma sometimes, even in our Caribbean region still, in terms of fatherhood, parenting, owning the child, and so forth. I would say to anybody who's out there who feels like that for some reason they're missing the knowledge of who their human father is, you have a heavenly father who loves you deeply and who will not leave you stranded because you can't figure out your DNA. He knows every cell in your body. And to that person, one of the things that you can do is, even though you might not be able to do your family tree, your with names and so forth, you can still access genetic counseling. You can still say, well, this is what I know, and this is what I don't know, and if you can afford, what are the tests that are available to me to find out what kind of mutations I might have. So there's science out there, even in the absence of understanding your family line. You can still figure out what might be present within your DNA that might or may not be problematic, so that you can help the generation after you. And I would say You know, we have a way of sometimes, this is off topic a bit, of stratifying humans, you know, um, but God knows every single cell in the body.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. Very wise counsel, very well said. So let's jump into this matter of cancer proofing, because in 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 spite of the fact that, as you indicated, some cancers are linked hereditarily. Um, Cancer, generally speaking, is a lifestyle disease. And I am thinking that what this really means is that we have the opportunity to determine to a significant extent if we get it or we don't get it. So what are some of the more significant at-risk behaviors that
Mm.
people may engage in that could either promote or heighten their chances of getting cancer or developing cancer?
Okay, so I'm going to speak very frankly, and you may choose not to have me back, and that's fine. I don't know who the sponsors are and all this kind of thing, but we do know that cancer is huge, okay, as it relates to the number of people who die of cancer every year globally. If you were to go now and go onto the WHO website, World Health Organization, you would see that 1 in 6 people around the world are going to die of cancer. So this is a huge deal, and I cannot use this platform and not use it responsibly to say that we do know that up to more than a third of cancers can be prevented. Okay, so the main lifestyle risk factor affecting persons is the 2,000 carcinogens, or I don't want to say carcinogens, that's hard. 2,000 plus toxins in tobacco smoke. Okay? So, one of the main things that we have to tell persons is it's not cool. It's not cool and useful and so forth to smoke. Okay? The use of tobacco can cause alterations in the DNA that controls the cell and that can trigger. So, this is especially important for things like lung cancer. And I remember there was a question someone had last year about lung cancer in Trinidad and so forth. But just remember, tobacco smoking is not cool. So if there's a young person in your life that is picking up that habit, and it's not too late to stop, there are benefits from stopping and reducing the risk of your cells being exposed to those carcinogens. So now the other thing I know that is very unpopular to say, because there's a whole song and dance around alcohol. And I cannot be on a platform like this and not raise the red flag about alcohol. So there's no safe limit for alcohol consumption as it relates to cancer. So there are some people, so I have a glass here because I tend to get my throat gets dry. It's an acrylic, I think it's acrylic glass. And you sometimes you would see this thing that would say, okay, if you're a lady, 1 glass of alcohol. If you're a lady, this amount of spirit. If you're a man, da 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 da. To say that there's this dose-dependent relationship about what is safe. So around carnival time, and it's coming up to carnival time, summer, people gonna work. They're gonna fat Friday night, fat Saturday night, fat Sunday night, and they will drink intermittently. This binge drinking, and then function during the week and binge again. And it will say drink responsibly, or they might say drive safely, or have a designated driver and all that. That relates to injuries, physical injuries and car crashes. The dose-dependent relationship relates to things like hypertension and diabetes. So the more you drink, the higher diabetes risk and all of that. But for cancer, there's no safe limit. So in other words, if you're thinking about cancer proofing your life and thinking about alcohol, you're cutting it. You're like literally cutting it out, right? So that's something that people have to think about. We have to think about our exposure to alcohol. And in Barbados, certainly we have a thing on Sundays where you will drink shandy. So not Adventist families, but it's common to give children, lemonade and beer. So you have to be thinking about what are you doing when you're exposing a younger body to introducing them to alcohol and then taking that through. Okay, so I know I'm mashing on toes. Okay, good. So the tobacco smoking, the alcohol consumption, what we do know is that processed red meats are detrimental. especially when it relates to things like colorectal cancer. So you're not wanting, there's a really, it's not complex, but it's very logical mechanism where if you're using red meat and that red meat contains blood and you are salting that meat, preserving that meat, using nitrites, etc. in the preservation process, you are creating other chemicals that when you consume that meat, it damages the lining of the colon. Also, if you're using fresh red meat, it's not preserved, it's not ultra processed, so it hasn't been made into the salami, the pastrami, the pepperoni, etc. But you're still gonna charcoal grill it, or even pan frying with high oil and taking it to high temperature. You're going to create chemicals and free radicals and so forth that when you consume that red meat, it's going to be damaging your colon. So what the evidence suggests is that you want to, and it's something that I personally struggle with, choose the vegetable that you like, choose the fiber source that you like. So what you want to do is to remove, the evidence will tell you limit red meats, avoid processed red meats, proteins of choice. If you're a consumer of animal products, the protein of choice would be poultry and fish. And if you are plant-based, then you will be using your nuts, your beans, and so forth. But you want to increase the fiber. The key is going to be increasing the fiber, because if there's any toxin that is in the colon, and the colon is like a tube, it has an inner core, you want any toxin, you don't want it to stay in your body for a long period of time. You want it to come through quickly. So using water and also increasing fiber is going to decrease the transit time. So anything is going to move through the colon and out quickly, and it has less opportunity to damage the colon. So that is tobacco smoking. You want to X that out, and you can get help with that in terms of smoking cessation. You can get help in terms of alcohol cessation. You can do some dietary modification where you're reducing harmful meats and introducing high fiber, and wanting to use fiber in terms of not just things where you might get complex carbs with fiber, like your ground provisions and so forth, but increasing your fruit and vegetable intake. That is useful, and you can balance that with any other condition that you have. I had a note here that I wanted to speak to physical activity, because
Before you
I'm going
talk,
too fast. Okay.
before you talk to physical activity, because
Sure.
you are sharing some very useful information, and I want to ensure that we don't miss anything. And now you did say that you're going to be frank, and I really do appreciate frankness. You know, this program is about dealing honestly and objectively with issues. What we want is to be able to provide help to those who listen. You did say, and I think I'm quoting you here, there is no safe limit for alcohol consumption when it comes to cancer.
That's
Um,
correct.
that to me is loaded. That is really very significant. And I wanted to go back to that because yes, I hear so many things. You know, you can one glass is good. And I hear some health professionals presenting and they're saying drink with moderation, a little is okay, and that kind of thing. But you're now saying that there is no safe limit when it comes to alcohol. I've even heard of research saying that, you know, red wine, the consumption of these things is good. And of course I've heard people say, well, you know, well, grape does have
That's
medicinal
very true.
properties. So
So
why?
those, yeah, that's when you're partitioning the science.
Mhm.
So those persons that speak to that, they're speaking about heart health and the resveratrol, and they're speaking about what's in the grape. It's not only in the wine, it can be found in the grape itself. And they're speaking of it in isolation. So they're usually speaking of what the how alcohol can impact on your heart and how it impacts diabetes. So they will say use in moderation to control the negative impact on your heart and diabetes, but they're never talking about where does cancer fit in this equation. So there's no and there's resistance to this conversation, but it's a scientific fact. There's no handshake between alcohol and cancer. There's no handshake. So if you want to talk about what cancer alcohol increases the risk of, just think about where it goes. So cancers of the head and neck, cancer of the esophagus, cancer of the stomach, cancer of the liver, cancer of the colon. Also, alcohol is we may drink, or people may drink for fun, but you're not consuming empty calories. You're not consuming something like water that has like 0 calories. You're intaking something that's going to give you excess calories as well. So the link between alcohol and obesity, and then obesity and cancer risk, etc., is just a cascade that is not a friendship. There's no friendship.
Very, very important, and I am grateful that you are emphasizing this. Okay, we have a couple of questions. I want to take this one at this particular point. Does stress play a role in developing cancer?
Okay. Yeah. So remind me to come back to physical activity.
I won't forget it.
Okay, yeah. So what we do know is that the function of the immune system is extremely important. Yeah. So remember we talked about the fact that cancer cells try to evade the system, and anything that is going to technically impact the immune system, there's a lot of work being done on those kinds of things, and stress is one of them. So there's work around something called allostatic load. So the amount of childhood trauma you might have had, the stressors in your life, the level of deprivation that you face, so your food security, the level of education, your employment, loss, grief. So there's a massive amount of work being done now to try to figure out, what are the differences between, I'm just gonna say, I know that when there's one significant loss that I've had in my life. A very, very dear cousin of mine passed away. And in the period after her death, nobody doesn't have to tell me, I never had gray hair like how I had gray hair after her death. It was like my face was different, my clothes were different, I felt different. It was stress. It was a period of acute advanced aging. So we know that as a person ages, their likelihood of getting cancer increases because of what we call cumulative risk. So you have lots of things that have happened to you in your life, and lots of things that you have been exposed to, and then the way how cells can repair is not as efficient. So as you get older, technically your risk of cancer increases. So there is a theory and lots of work being done that says stress may cause a person to age faster than their actual age. So anything that sometimes can accelerate aging or destroy or distort the way how a cell can repair can. So that's part of the theory as to why sleep deprivation may play a role in cancer risk. If you're not sleeping properly, you're not repairing, your chronological age does not necessarily match your ability to repair, and so forth. So to the person that asked that question, the answer is there appears to be an association with lifestyle stress, whether that's job, relationship, etc., adverse childhood events. There's more and more evidence coming around about the impact of acute stress and chronic stress, including chronic deprivation, on the risk of cancer.
Okay, wonderful. Let's allow you to talk to the exercise elements.
Thank you. Okay, so physical activity. So we want to emphasize that this is not about going to the gym, or this is about movement, a movement that allows you to help your colon in terms of colon cancer, in terms of the more you're physically active, that transit time that I mentioned, the transit time is less. So stuff moves through the colon faster when you're moving. If you are physically active, you are more likely to have what we will call a normal body mass index. so the amount of excess weight that you are carrying is less. And we do know that the more weight that we carry, the more fat cells that we carry, especially the ones around our tummy area, it plays a role in certain hormones, and those hormones then have a knock-on effect on cancer. So what we're saying, I know that in there, don't ask me how I know this song, but I know this song. There was a song when I was growing up, and the guy said he was talking about women, and he was saying that his Caribbean women, he needs them to be robust and thick, and there's a body type that is admired, but that body type is not necessarily the best body type in terms of what those fat cells can do to hormones, and what those hormones do to increasing the risk of breast cancer, and what those hormones do to increasing the risk of cancer of the womb, especially in women who have gone through the menopause. If you've gone through menopause, which is when you've gone through a year or more with no period, no menses, if you're carrying that weight after menopause, especially increases your risk of those kinds of cancers. So what we're saying is physical activity can help you to maintain a normal body mass index. And we like to talk about people who fall off. You can't lose weight in the Caribbean without somebody speculating, but it's good to lose weight at your choice. You're losing weight because you want to make yourself healthier. You're not losing weight because something is wrong and cancer cells are using up more energy and causing you to lose weight. It's better to lose the weight before and to bring your body mass index down if it is out of control. So those are the main things I wanted to mention with physical activity. I know it might sound that I was talking about physical activity in the context of women, but this is also important as well for men and their colon health. You want to stay physically active to reduce that transit time and to help to control any excess fat that you may have. And this also has implications for prostate cancer as well. Yeah.
Now we have a number of questions, and I'm seeing that we're going to be challenged with time here, but we're going to see how it works out anyway.
Okay.
But okay, let me somebody's asking here, is it true that cancer cells cannot survive in an alkaline environment? So if this is true, how can we alkalize our system? Interesting question.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to take what I want to answer from this person's question. So there is a thing that is going around where people talk about alkaline foods and alkaline water, yeah, and changing the pH of the blood so that it makes it more alkaline. So we're in a Christian setting, Christian broadcast, how God has made us, we have a very delicate balance, a very homeostasis. Everything is balanced. So the blood is tied with how you breathe, how you excrete, etc., etc. So there's certain parts of our bodies that are acidic, and then there's certain parts of our bodies that might be slightly more alkaline. So the pH in the blood is totally different from the pH in the lining of the stomach. When persons drink alkaline water, I don't think that Greene, you have me back again. When persons drink alkaline water, the water is alkaline in the bottle, but when it hits the stomach, you tell me what happens to that alkaline water that you just bought. Don't answer me, right? but it still needs to be absorbed. What is more important than alkaline water, I would imagine, would be foods that do not stress the kidneys. One of the major parts of the body that is responsible for maintaining the pH of the blood is the system that occurs in the kidneys. What you want is to use foods that do not stress the kidneys too much. And persons who are on dialysis or who have problems with their kidneys, they know that they have to go on a special diet, what some people might abbreviate and call it a renal diet, where you're not putting too many proteins that your body has to break down into certain chemicals that might change the pH balance. I think what people mean when they speak to an alkaline diet They're meaning a diet that is not excessive in proteins that are not useful for the body, including protein sources like cheese. And if you want to use a diet that is not going to be stressing the kidneys too much, it ends up translating to a plant-based diet. It ends up being a diet that is heavy in leaves and cruciferous vegetables, so like your broccoli, your cauliflower, and so forth. There are certain persons that may have so many challenges with maintaining the protein, the pH balance of their blood, that they may have to take bicarbonate tablets to help them, so that when that is then absorbed and so forth, it helps them with their pH balance. But the regular person, the advice would be to use, if you're concerned about how much protein load you're putting on your body in a way that might cause your kidneys to be under stress and to not balance the pH as well as it should, you're really seeking to adopt a plant-based diet. Now, the thing with plant-based diet, especially those that are heavy on leaves, they are not going to give you calories, okay? They're not going to be heavy on calories. So this is where your nutritionist comes in, and you're having a holistic diet being developed so that you're not forcing yourself to become malnourished in other ways. So Harvard School of Public Health has a healthy eating plate. I would advise anybody to have a look at that. It's free, and it gives good guidance. So it would say, like, if you're choosing a beverage, your beverage of choice might be water. You want to stay away from things that are added sugar. A quarter of your plate will be things that have complex carbohydrates, that you're going to be avoiding red meats, avoiding processed red meats, limiting red meats, limiting cheese, using nuts and peas and so forth. So you're not going to say vegetarian, it's going to talk about plant-based, and it's going to tell you 3/4 of your plate is going to be heavy on your vegetables, and then you have a mixed set of things, and then it gives advice on oils and so forth. So if people are really wanting to think about alkalinizing, it's not a word that I use, that is the approach that we want to take, and not using things that are not necessarily going to give them the results, but may come at a cost. That was long, but I hope it helps the person.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Now, I just want to, while it's not in the context of cancer, but you did mention that one of the things people ought to be able to do, in terms of this debate about alkaline, and I was tempted to respond to what happens to the water when it gets into the stomach, but we leave that. But the comment I want to pick up on is this matter of overstressing the kidneys, because again, in the Caribbean context, I can reflect on when I was a child growing up. There was this emphasis on a heavy protein diet. You didn't feel you're eating unless you had this amount of protein in your plate. And I think a lot of persons don't seem to understand. So I'm asking you to re-emphasize this, that excessive protein, especially with the red meats and that kind of thing, is really putting excess strain on your kidneys, because you can't store protein, and the whole concept of having to convert these things to safe levels in the body, and the body having to make urine from the ammonium that is a byproduct, etc., is important. So can you just say a word on that quickly?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would want to suggest, that as we are thinking about cancer proofing our lives, and you will notice that the things that are recommended for cancer proofing your life, cancer proof, they NCD proof almost everything. And I think the key thing is balance. Okay, the key thing is going to be balance, and this comes back to what we will call temperance. What you want to do is to make sure that you're living a lifestyle that is fundamentally balanced, and not extreme. So we talked just now about what a balanced diet looks like, what a balanced healthy diet looks like, and it looks like according to what is growing around you and available, etc., to have that primarily have sufficient fruits and vegetables, and that being a dominant part of what you're eating, you're balancing your energy intake so that you're not having excess carbs, etc., that is then going to be stored as fat, that you're having your sources of fruits and vegetables, fruits so you can get your antioxidants and various kinds of things, that you're having your water for hydration for your cells and your cellular repair, and that you're also having like safe things like oils and so forth, but that you're also preparing your food in a way that is not promoting of ill health. So you will know that we talk a lot now about avoiding ultra processed foods, and even if you're cooking fresh foods, that you're cooking them in a way that you're not creating these nitrosamines, and then you're putting protein in its rightful place, you know. The protein, when you look at that healthy eating plate, your protein is only going to be a quarter of what you are going to be consuming on that meal. So it's not half the plate of chicken and then lamb and then beef, you know, all three serving. And then there's re-education that is needed about what is actually a serving of protein and what that actually looks like, the actual size. So I would say the key thing is balance. So when it comes down to cancer, and what we're revising here is that we're saying that we have to live happily, but we can have knowledge that can help us to be as healthy as we can be without becoming paranoid. Yeah. So what we're saying is that we know that there are things that we are going to be exposed to, chemicals that we might be exposed to physically, or infections and so forth. And if we know some of the signs and symptoms of the various cancers, like what we covered last year, we can work to pick things up early. But there are also lifestyle things that we can do to reduce our risk. So we're going to eat well, we're going to be sleeping well, we're going to take in our physical activity, we're cutting out the alcohol, we're cutting out the tobacco, and we are also seeing our doctors, our physicians, if we notice anything that has gone off. If we're in an island where there's screening available for breast cancer, colorectal, cervical cancer, etc., we are going to do these things so that if these cells are becoming bad behaved, they can be identified and put out of the classroom before they cause havoc in the school. And those are the fundamental principles of cancer proofing. And then we spoke also about the genetics and the discussions with the families and so forth. So I would say balance, education, balance, and action. If you have all the knowledge and you're not doing anything with it.
I think you have said it well. If we can squeeze two more questions from our listeners. Somebody's asking, I don't need you to spend a lot of time on this one, but do unnaturally raised animals with their high intake of growth hormones contribute to the development of cancers? Some persons are concerned that, you know, these chickens, for example, they give them so much hormones, they move from babies to adults in 6 weeks. Does that have any impact or any relationship to the human being and to cancer formation? That I believe is the question.
Okay, so it may not necessarily. So I'm always going to be speaking from an evidence based on the strength of evidence. We may not know as yet the definitive answer, but we do know that it contributes to other things. So there's a whole other conversation that you can have about something called antimicrobial resistance and the impact that the antimicrobial resistance and the use of antibiotics in the food chain is having on humans and human health, in terms of our ability to fight certain infections if and when they do occur in our bodies. So that, I think, is probably the most dominant part of that conversation related to what happens in the rearing or the mass rearing of animals. But if you are looking for quality meat, so to speak, and in the poultry industry, there will always be a deference to things that are free range, you know, where the animals are seemingly under less stress, they have less light manipulation, less hormones and so forth. Some, you know, there's
Okay.
interest there. I would say. And I would say then there's also the benefits of consuming meat that does not have the blood in it. So whether that becomes a conversation about how animals are slaughtered, how meat is drained, what people choose to take into their bodies, that's another conversation for sure. Yeah.
I will just ask you this one. I'll combine these two questions because this is all the time we have right now. In fact, we're kind of over time, but this is our celebration month, so we'll take a chance.
The party is going long.
Yes. So somebody's asking, can hormonal changes play a role in the developing of cancer? And I'm going to combine this. If, I don't know if it's a good combination, but if someone has lumpy breasts, what is the risk of developing cancer? So one about
Right.
hormonal changes and cancer, and the other one about lumpy breasts.
Yeah. Okay. So fundamentally changes in hormones. As I think this person or these people are thinking about breast cancer in particular, I'm going to speak about that. So we know that there are some breast cancers that are hormonally driven, meaning that they grow because of exposure to hormones. In particular, the hormone that is very important is estrogen. The same thing happens with prostate cancer and exposure to testosterone. So what we call this is part of the reason why obesity control or overweight control is important in breast cancer. So exposure to estrogen does increase the risk. Exogenous estrogen, that estrogen that comes in from outside of your body, will increase the risk and can affect how well people do if they have hormonally driven cancers. So this person should have a conversation with their doctor about if they are on an exogenous estrogen, like how they're using that, how much they're using it, how often, etc. And that's a conversation that can be had. So that was the estrogen. And then in terms of the lumpy breast, I'm gonna say that lumpy breast sometimes may feel lumpy on the outside, and that equates to what might be seen as a cyst inside. So some people may have something called fibrocystic disease of the breast. Now, fibrocystic disease of the breast is not cancerous, but there are some cysts that can undergo change. So if that person finds that they may have a cyst and that cyst is growing rapidly, or it has been drained by their doctor and it has recollected quickly, usually in 12 weeks or less, which is about 3 months, that's something that you want to have monitored and maybe examined more carefully, excised, biopsy, etc., as recommended by the surgeon. So some women with fibrocystic disease of the breast may need to be on a slightly different monitoring, so to speak, to calculate their risk, and also their type of screening might be different, and also they may have cyst removal, etc., depending on what's happening in their individual case. So yes, hormones play a role, especially the hormone estrogen plays a role in formation of breast cancer, and rather also it's important in the treatment of breast cancer, because if the cancer is growing because of estrogen, you can actually block the contact of those abnormal cells with estrogen, and that helps the woman to live longer. Thus blocking the estrogen can be part of the treatment pathway.
Okay, very good indeed. Now, so we're going to end now, but you did indicate right at the beginning that one of the reasons for the reduction of some cancers, the good news that we spoke about earlier, is the increased screening and also the availability of the HPV vaccine. I want you to end on that, maybe just in your summarizing the benefits, the value of screening, and clarify this for me likewise, because I was in a discussion one place. I heard one person say that the HPV vaccine is available for both males and female, and then another person say no, it's only for females. So clarify that likewise.
I am so happy to do so, jumping right into it. So when we talk about screening, we are talking about the ability to detect changes in the body at a time where the disease has not fully manifested itself, and you have the opportunity to change the course of the disease. So you're picking up things super early and you can change the course of the disease, and for the most part, you're trying to achieve a cure. So for some of the major cancers that affect our region, we do have screening tests. So for prostate cancer, there is the PSA blood test along with something called the digital rectal examination. For breast cancer, we have the mammogram, and that can be combined with ultrasound and or MRI, depending on what the person is going through. For cervical cancer, you have things like the pap smear, and you have DNA, HPV typing that can be combined with that. And then there's also, especially in Guyana, sometimes you might still do, you might do something called direct visualization, and then there are other things as well. So there's loads for cervical cancer. Also for colorectal cancer, we have something called a GWAIT test. There's FIT DNA test. So you can have a immune test that can look at the stool to see if there's blood there. And then you can layer on top of that DNA that can pick up if anything is. There's so much right now, especially for those particular four. So I would say in your particular island, find out what is available and talk to a healthcare provider about your life, your health history, and making yourself lining up with your age and what should be done. So most things usually start around 40 or so. Certainly for colorectal, 45. If you have a strong family history, it may be adjusted, but talk to your doctor and work out the particular regime that's useful for you. As it relates to the human papilloma virus, there are more than 70 subtypes of that particular virus, but some of them we know increase the risk of certain types of cancers. So it could be cancer of the cervix, cancer of the penis, cancer of the anus, cancer of the throat. And so we know that there's a vaccine that boosts the immune system's response to that virus if you should contract it, so that virus cannot linger around and cause changes to your cells. So you usually, unfortunately, human papilloma virus is technically a sexually transmitted virus, and therefore you want to vaccinate people before they become sexually active usually, because it's also a very widespread, ubiquitous virus. So it's offered to both boys and girls, right? So that's the answer to the question, is offered to both boys and girls, usually around what we would call the 11 plus age, right? Because most children, certainly boys, the last study I saw was out of Turks and Caicos. Turks and Caicos. I think it's like the average age of onset of first coitus was around 14. So that's why the evidence suggests vaccinate children before. However, if you are interested as an older person in having the vaccine, you can have a conversation with your doctor. They may want to test you to see if you've already been exposed to the virus. If you've already been exposed to the virus, it makes no sense to do the vaccine. But if you haven't, then you can have that conversation. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dr.
You're
Greaves.
welcome.
It was a pleasure, as always, to have you on Let's Talk.
Pleasure being here, and happy anniversary again.
Yes, and we wish you God's blessings. Didn't get through all the questions, but we have to stay
That's
put.
all right.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Those of you who are still on, please note that next week we have a different conversation. We're going to be talking to Dr. Siobhan Bell Jarvis. We are looking at the subject of the first, this matter of raising your children, the first 1,000 days of a child's life. And so Dr. Jarvis is going to be sharing with us next week. That promises to be a very interesting discussion. We look forward to having you. God bless you, and do have a wonderful